So, Jay, of course, you know Jeremy Sirota. He's the CEO of Merlin. He is stepping down on December 31st. And he wrote an interesting piece in LinkedIn. He said, when I step down on, again, December 31st, I will have spent 2,190 days as CEO of Merlin. And he said, as a first-time CEO, I have learned a lot during that time. And he puts his top 42 things that he learned as a CEO, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, as soon as I read this, I called him up. Jeremy's a friend, and I just love this take on, being a first-time CEO and talking about the lessons that you learn. So what we do here is he picks sort of his top 10 of those lessons, and then I pick 10 that are my favorites without telling him what they are. And we go over each one. And thank you, Jeremy, for doing this. It was a lot of fun, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So without further ado, here's Jeremy Sirota on a special episode of the Your Morning Coffee podcast. Let it roll.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Jeremy, good to see you, my friend. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, this will be fun. For those that don't know, you wrote a piece that I saw on LinkedIn, and it really resonated with me. You wrote, and I quote, when I stepped down from being the CEO of Merlin, when I stepped down December 31st, I will have spent 2,190 days as CEO of Merlin. As a first-time CEO, I learned a lot during that time, and you listed 42 things that you had learned. And as I was reading through the list, I was going, oh my God, yep. And there were some in there that were a little surprising, some of them that I thought would be an interesting story. So what I thought we would do is you read one of your top 10, and then you and I haven't reviewed my top 10, so you have no idea which ones are my top 10. And then I will sort of drop some of mine in there and see what you think of that. How about that?
I like it. I like that a lot. Let's do that.
You kick it off.
Okay, I'm going to kick it off. I'm kicking it off with number 3 on the list, which is now I'm starting to sound like it's a countdown to a... But number 3 on the list was never stop learning or asking basic questions. And I'm going to really focus on the sort of second part of that, the asking basic questions. And it's amazing how people get so tied up in like the nuances and the details that sometimes they don't just step back and say, what are we trying to achieve here?
Exactly.
Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And what I have found, and I found with a lot of leaders, is I have a bit of an insatiable curiosity, which helps to drive my questions. And I don't know what, I actually want to interview a neuroscientist because I think there is a relationship between obviously nurturing like childhood experiences, but there's got to be something more about personality traits and dopamine levels. And because there are people who like consistency and predictability. And I have found that those who operate with this curiosity tend to also operate really well and ambiguity.
Yeah.
And there's some sort of correlation between those two. And what I do know, though, is you can develop a fluency in this. This is not limited to just leaders or managers. Like anyone can just stop and ask basic questions.
Right.
You just kind of need to give yourself permission to do that. And that was one of the things that I had to do in this role, was just sometimes stop and just ask, how did we get here?
And asking those basic questions, and I've seen this of great leaders, some leaders want to portray that they know all the answers, but the really good leaders, I had a meeting with Doug Morris one time when I used to work at Universal, and he asked me some basic questions. And I was thinking in my head, like, what are you asking me that for? Like, you've been doing this for decades, But I think it's important to ask those questions.
It is, because there's always people coming at it from different perspectives, different generations, different experiences, and they're always informing. And I love that. I know I can talk a lot. You can ask anyone in my company, or anyone who knows me.
You take that back.
Well, it's because it's how I work through problems. Like, I think out loud. And so I actually have this email that comes in and out of my inbox on Gmail. And I just kind of snooze it, sometimes for a couple of days, sometimes for weeks, sometimes for months. And it literally just says 4 words: shut up and listen.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that actually gives us a segue, a beautiful segue into my first one, which is number 10 on your list. And it's, when in doubt, over communicate. And I found that's not only true in business, but in relationships we have to over communicate. There's this thing that I was reading one time about the problems that people have in relationships as well. He should just know, or she should just know. Well, no, if you haven't made it a deliberate thing to say, Jay, I need A, B, and C by this thing, and have that communication, then it's on you. And I think part of what you do, and I'd love to get your take on this, especially at a corporate level, is making sure that everyone's sort of clear on the mission, everyone's involved in it, but that you're over communicating things. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, this is a great one, because we're going through this as a company right now. I found that it really happens in cycles, where you get to a good place around your communication levels. And then, just by nature of working in the music industry, it can be a little bit fire drill driven. Working in a very disruptive industry with partners in the technology space, growth. Merlin as a company has grown in terms of its employees, but also, more importantly, the suite of services it provides.
Yeah.
And when you're a leader, you can sometimes take for granted that everyone gets it, that it clicks. Whereas, and I don't have the stat right in front of me, but there was this statistic, like, you need to repeat something 100 times before it rationalizes for them and it clicks for them. And one of the most important parts is to do that through storytelling, because facts, the brain doesn't operate on facts. It operates through telling stories. And we're back in this period at Merlin where we've kind of have almost too many channels of communication. And we did this entire organizational assessment. Honestly, we just finished up last week, and it was one of the elements that came through is we need to rationalize how and where we communicate, so everyone knows sort of what they're doing, everyone knows why we're doing it. And I just found this comes in cycles through companies. But when in doubt, say more, and start with the basics. Always start with the basics. That always gets lost. You almost jump right into the details.
Yeah.
And there's this is what this is, and this is why we're doing it.
Yeah.
And it creates this really nice scaffolding for people to kind of slot information into.
Some of this stuff may sound pedantic to someone, well, of course you do that. But we've been around enough to know that these things may sound basic, but they're very important and they're often missed.
Yeah. I say this oh my gosh, I love that you said that. I say this so often. I know I'm about to say something obvious, but I don't want to just assume that you've done this. I wanted to start with the top of the pyramid, and then we can work our way down into the details. But let's make sure we're all operating from the same playbook. Are we really talking the same language.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite things at the end of a meeting is to set clear expectations. We just said these 3 things are going to happen. Can we make sure we know who the point of contact is, what the day they're going to do it, and can actually you repeat back to me what you heard you're going to go do? And
Love
it's
that.
just about this like alignment, because people hear things differently.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So it's a really, it's a big one for me. I
Well,
love that one.
before we move on to the next one, the last thing I'll say is just a quick little story. When Jim Urey and Henry Droz came over to Universal, we had one of our first staff meetings. The entire staff was there around a big table. And someone was spewing all this information, this radio information. Oh, we've got this many ads on this station in this city. And he was dropping, oh, this is triple breaker and this one's this and this is something out of the box. And after a few minutes, Jim stopped him and he said, show of hands, how many people here know what that term means? And like 3 hands went up. And he goes, let's back up a little bit. And I love that because he made sure that everybody at that table, whether they were a senior vice president or a brand new employee, that we weren't just throwing around jargon, that everybody actually understood. It was less performative. It wasn't theater. It was actually like, let's help each other to understand this. So anyway, hit me with your next one.
Yeah. Next one is the CEO's job is to set the destination, not drive the bus.
Ooh.
And just to step back for a second, before I became CEO of Merlin, I was a first-time CEO when I came into this role. I took over for Charles Caldis, who was the founder CEO, and he had created this incredible organization, mission-driven, had the trust of its members, has this culture of kindness at the company that was really important to me to continue to nourish that.
Yeah.
But I had the wherewithal to know that I could do this. This was always something I'd been building towards, but I'd never actually done it before, right? I'd managed teams, of course. And so when I came in, man, I was everywhere. I wanted to do everything. Like I wanted to almost carry the company on my back. And what I realized is like, yes, there's a certain level of value that came from that, to really understanding the history of the company and why we did what we did. But people move at different cadences. And if I could show them where we were headed, then my goal was then to give them the tools to paint the canvas themselves. And it took me years to really absorb that and understand that. And
was it hard for you to let go of that? Because sometimes it's like nobody, it took me longer to get somebody else to do this and I can just do it myself. But as a leader, you have to delegate.
There was, when you're younger, you say, oh, no one can do it as good as I can do it. But that's actually the wrong way to look at it. Even if it's true, put aside whether it's true or not. The real point is that it takes the team to find success. And it's not that you can do it better than them. It's that they're going to do it different than you. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And that was a lesson that took me time to internalize and to slowly let go. And it took, I had a lot of support through that. And once I did, I saw the company would flourish a lot more, because when you push empowerment down to people, which is challenging, right? It's hard to let go of making decisions. But when you push that down, people feel that they have more room, a bigger field to play in and operate in. And the key to that is just, they're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. Oh my gosh, let's not go through that, but I've made mistakes. And you have to forgive yourself and you have to forgive others when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. My next one is number 14 on the list. And it's learning to say no is more valuable than saying yes. And I'll give you just a quick example. When I first got the job with Universal, and I was there for 18 years, so this is a long time ago, I met with my boss and I was frantic about getting this ad campaign done for one of my large accounts. And I needed that budget and I needed it approved right away, I thought. And I was just like hounding him, like, did you get approval? Can I do this thing? And his answer to me, I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he said, Jay, if you need an answer now, the answer's no. And sometimes there's, there's timing issues and I don't know, but I'd love to get your take on learning to say no is sometimes more valuable than saying yes.
Yeah, this was actually multifaceted, but I will, because this has sort of different meanings. But one I'll focus on is when let's talk about Warner Music as well. When I was there for 9 years, one of the people I worked with quite closely who helped to mentor me was a gentleman named Paul Sinclair, who used to be general manager of Atlantic Records. And he gave me this advice early on. He's like, there are things you're going to get to and you have to prioritize. Then there's your second list, the things you want to get to and need to at some point. And then there's just a third list that you just need to get rid of. Like you're just never going to get to it. And you need to, what I call reduce cognitive load. The more that sits around, it kind of just sits in the back of your head. And a lot of what saying no to is about focus. And one of the pieces that we're trying to push down more and more into the company, especially for more junior staff, is you need to raise your hand and say no. When your plate is full, when you have competing priorities, like people above you may not know, especially if a lot of people suffer in silence, unfortunately. And so we're just always trying to communicate that importance of saying no, to stay focused, stay prioritized, because there's a million ways you could spread yourself thin.
I like that a lot. All right. What's your next one?
Okay. I have lucky number 7. Your calendar reveals your true priorities. Don't fill it haphazardly. And I've met with many senior leaders, other CEOs, and their calendars literally are filled with back-to-back-to-back meetings. It's I compare it to like a bad game of pinball. You're just like being thrown around all over the place with the flippers. And I just don't know how to operate that way. Like I've done it. I did it when I was at Facebook for 2 years. Like that was how it worked when you were in that zone. But as you start to move into leadership or even managerial roles, like I have 50% of my calendar blocked off every week for deep focus, for medium, long-term planning, and then just for the unexpected. Someone's in town. Instead of having to rearrange my whole calendar, it's like, great, yeah, let's do this. 2:00 coffee, done. Looking forward to seeing you. But I also have another one, which is I will make, I can only spread myself so thin, but I always try to take a first meeting, but I'm ruthless about the second. Because you could have endless conversations with new people you meet, and I love it because I'm curious. I like meeting people. I always like to find opportunities and build things. But you have to start to be ruthless about it. Do the first, be ruthless about the second.
All right. My next one is number 16 on your list. And I found this really interesting. You wrote, strategy isn't a document, it's daily choices. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. So you've been in these meetings. I've been in these meetings where you come out with you go into a brainstorming session, you come out with this strategic document. Sometimes maybe you've even done an offsite and you brought in a high-powered facilitator to run it for you. And you create this incredible punch list of all these opportunities. How many times have you been in those where those lists just sit in a dustbin and they don't go anywhere? And it will actually bleed into the next one I was going to do, which maybe I'll just bleed right into
Sure.
Which is your default setting should be action, not analysis. And one of my favorite sort of pithy, almost meaningless, but totally meaningful expressions is momentum creates momentum. Sometimes you just have to do things. Like I was on a call this morning and we were being presented this strategy, and it's like, we could tweak this, we could tweak that. And, maybe it's just me being the sort of like New Yorker, American, former lawyer, just like, hey, sounds like we're 90% of the way there. Can we just go? Like today, can we start? And that's really important because you can keep analyzing and overanalyzing and reanalyzing and or create these great documents. But until you actually do something, it's not strategy, it's just ideas. And so that one means a lot to me. I'll give you one other example. We had a strategy about which, you continue to iterate on these around how can we better service our members, be more responsive. And we spun up Zendesk. We thought we were so clever. So clever. I was like, this is going to be great. This is going to solve all our problems. Guess what happened? It was terrible. It didn't work. It was not a good fit. It was too enterprise level for what we needed. But instead of saying, okay, this doesn't work, we're done, we pivoted. We said, okay, what didn't work about this? And is there still a problem we could solve with another service? And then we pivoted and we used Freshdesk. And we now have multiple teams using it who love it. But not everyone does. And so you just kept iterating. We're like, okay, we have the strategy. We need to be more responsive. And now we're testing out Copilot from Microsoft. We found so many people want to use Outlook. So how do we build tools into Outlook versus saying, here's the one solution that everyone has to do? And that's just that example of like, it's not so much a strategy as most to just how do you execute and move? And that's really important in this world where everything's moving so fast.
Oh, absolutely. When I read that strategy isn't a document, this story came back to my head that I've used a lot, which is when I left the major label ecosystem and started consulting for artists and managers, I went to a major label meeting and they presented this marketing plan and it was stunning. It had charts and graphs and here's what we're going to do for the tour and brand partnerships. Everything was in there and it was just beautiful. And then as I followed this campaign, I realized it was never referred to again. It was all theater. And was it accomplished? Did we do the things we said we were going to do in that document? So we put together a lot of marketing plans. We got them on a table and we wrote down on a yellow pad, these are the things that are in pretty much 90% of all marketing plans. And we broke it up by, we need to do this 6 months out and 3 months out and whatever. And it looks like a form that you fill out, but it's really just something that you keep. And as we have meetings, I can say, Jeremy, you were going to get those instrumental versions for sync. Are we good there? Oh yeah, no, we're good. And it just kept the conversation going. And we found that just having that conversation without necessarily having that marketing plan document, it really helped. So I couldn't agree with you more that on the strategy side, that it's not necessarily the documents that you use, it's how you engage and have those conversations with your team. I thought that was a good one.
Yeah. I'm also CEO of my daughter's fencing career, the tournament she has to go to. And when you go to these tournaments, especially when you have to travel by plane,
oh, wow,
so much you have to remember. I cannot keep that straight in my head. I have a checklist. And I know I'm never going to forget anything because it's on the checklist. And I just go through the checklist and I follow what it tells me to do. And if I notice something new, I change it. And this goes to my next one. I already forgot who's up next. But
I think it's yours. Go ahead.
Okay. Which is focus beats brilliance every time.
Ooh.
And I say this, and it's not exciting, but it matters so much. Operational rigor matters. And it doesn't matter how you do it, whether you use something like Trello or Notion, or you just I have a lot of just Google Sheet checklists, reminders, whatever it is, just that ability to be process oriented, it's going to win the race every time because no one's going to write the next Odyssey book about process. But when you have it, you can just see how much better the engine runs. And that's something, just automation, efficiency, scale. Like that's one of the elements that I've brought into Merlin and how we operate. It's just giving people license, say, this doesn't work. This is too manual. Can we find a tool? Can we bring in a subject matter expert to help us figure out how to do this better? And that's just in the sea of information and tasks and everything we have to do. It's the only thing that keep us oriented.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones on here. I circled that one. My next one, and I deeply believe in this, hire people smarter than you, then get out of their way. And I think all of my favorite leaders throughout working for Universal and Warner Music Group, they did that. They surrounded themselves with really good people, really smart people. They didn't have to be the smartest person in the room because they surrounded themselves with really good people. Talk about hiring people smarter than you and getting out of their way.
I've done this. So I've done this two ways. I did this when I first started my career as a lawyer. I worked at a big law firm as a technology lawyer called Morrison & Foerster. And when I went there, I was not the smartest person, hands down. Like every single person in that firm was probably smarter than I was. These are folks going to the Harvards and the Yales and the Columbias and you name it. And what I knew was that I wanted to surround myself, even from an early point in my career, with people smarter than me, because it challenges you to do better. And when you're early in your career, you're a little scared about being around smarter people because you think it might showcase your deficiencies. Whereas I believe, just like sports, you always want to play someone slightly better than yourself. It helps elevate you. And so the same happens when you become a leader, which is you do not want to be the smartest person in the room. You want people who know things better than you, who have better skills than you, because you're going to be able to deploy them in incredible ways. They're going to help elevate you. You're going to learn from them.
Yeah.
And that's super important to me. A lot of people can operate on a basis of fear as leaders. Oh, well, if there's someone smarter than me, they're going to showcase that maybe they should have my job. But your ability to lean into that, it's a force multiplier. It's really the difference between leaders who can truly succeed and drive change and those who kind of maybe sit there and do well, but sit there in kind of first, second gear.
I like it. All right, you're up.
Yep. Let's just stick with this theme of hiring,
Okay.
which is never stop recruiting even when you're not hiring.
Interesting.
And what I mean by this is, I'm constantly meeting people all the time, and I am keeping a mental checklist. I may not have a role immediately available, and maybe they're in fact not even at the right point in their career that I want to hire them, but I see something in them, and I just bluntly, I have a checklist of names of folks that at one point I'd love to hire, I'd love to work with. And it's really important to have that because, number one, you never know when someone might leave your company. But number two, you never know when suddenly you need that person or that role opens. And instead of starting from scratch, you're starting from a Rolodex of really capable people. In fact, we have potentially an opening or a role we might open. And I already have someone in mind because they interviewed with us almost 2 years ago.
I like that one. My next one is the best ideas rarely come from the top. And I think that might be counterintuitive to some people, but some of my favorite meetings, especially working for labels, is when they bring everybody to the table and there's no such thing as a bad idea when they're brainstorming. And some of these people might be somebody's assistant, or they could be from the mailroom, or they could be an SVP. But these ideas come from many different places. Talk about your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, there are individuals in the arc of history who've had an oversized impact on where we've gone in industries as society. I'm not going to pretend to be one of those people. But what I do know is that I can create structures and opportunities to allow people to have ideas flow from, where ideas are welcomed, where mistakes are tolerated. And that takes a lot of, because you're asking people both to do their jobs and simultaneously be thinking of new ideas. And that may be simple, just like a new process we're going to put in place to simplify how we send royalty statements out to our members. But it goes back to the 1% improvement principle. If you can improve how you operate or how you do something 1% every month, that compounds so much over a year that you don't see it month to month, but by the end of the year, you've virtually transformed how you operate. And so all we're trying to do is continue to find ways and opportunities through summits, through cross-functional task force, through anyone can propose an idea, I really like bad idea days. Let's come up with the worst way to solve this problem. Because then it's just, yeah, you're laughing. You're already having fun. Whereas if it's like, how do we solve this? It's like you almost freeze because there's a reason it hasn't been solved. And then no one wants to look stupid with a bad idea, or no one wants to go first. Or if someone has a great idea and someone has a semi-good idea, they don't want to go after them. Whereas it's like everyone can have a bad idea.
Yeah. I love that. All right. What's your next one?
My next one's really easy. This is every company is a people company. And we have our second board meeting of the year. I was going to say next week, but like 3 days. So I just wanted to read the opening few sentences from the company update we're giving to the board. What makes Merlin special isn't complicated. We hire exceptional people. We empower them to make a difference, and we commit to their success. We are a high-intensity, high-impact, mission-driven organization navigating the rapid changes happening at the intersection of music and technology. Merlin's values come down to his people. The more well-situated they are, the better they can deliver value. Yes, the mission, the members, the services, and even the technology. But none of those matter if your people aren't set up for success. Investing in our people allows them to deliver their best work to our members.
That is an inspiring mission statement, and it sounds genuine.
Yeah, it's, my legacy are the people I hired. That's how I view it.
Yeah.
People I brought in to help create a better culture, a better company, and deliver on the mission. That's what I hope I'm judged against.
Yeah, I still keep in touch with people that I've hired, and I am thrilled to see them flourish. And I know you are too. All right. I have one that some people may not agree with, but I think it's key. And it's customer feedback is gold. Mine it relentlessly. And this can be across, products. It can also be if you're looking at comments for an artist on YouTube or whatever it is. I feel like you really need to get into that customer feedback and not be so sensitive and offended by something that's negative, but just see what you can learn from that. Talk a little bit about why you put that on the list.
Yeah, I would only quibble with one statement you made, which is you can still be offended.
Okay. Fair point.
You can't take it personally. You need to learn to take the emotion and the ego out of it and step back and try to evaluate it dispassionately. If you almost want to take this out of body experience, say, okay, if they're talking about my competitor, how would I evaluate this now? Like, that's a really good way to sort of step yourself out of it. It sounds like semantics, and it kind of is, but the fun thing about our brains is you can trick them. And what you do when you look at this, which is not all complaints, not all feedback is relevant. Not all of it is accurate, but you start to discern patterns, and that's where you can start to make better decisions. And the key is just how do you create the right feedback loops? And it's really challenging. I will tell you that, having done this now for 6 years at Merlin, how to create those right feedback loops and get to how people really feel. I mean, we have 450 members alone, and it's not like a member is a single person, right? That's across deal teams, partnerships teams, marketing teams, finance teams. So it's really like there's all these different constituents before you even get to our digital partners or before you even get to our board. And we've tried to create these feedback loops. And it really does, once again, you might have these initial reactions, which if you're human, you will, which is you have a negative reaction to it at first, because no one likes to be critiqued, of course. But then once you get over that, you can start to see whether this is relevant and you're sort of missing something around the corner that you're not seeing.
Yeah. I read the story about Jeff Bezos and Amazon. And of course, customer opinions are very important to the leadership at Amazon. And there was this thing called a cold and prickly, which was the opposite of soft and fuzzy. And it was a complaint about a certain product line. And if it escalated and got to Jeff Bezos's desk, he would send out a note to the leader in that vertical, and they had a couple of hours to get to his office and to sit down and talk about how they were going to address that issue. And that may be a little bit heavy-handed, but that company is built on that customer satisfaction. And there's just certain companies that you've worked with that that they're checking out the customer feedback. Okay, what's your next one?
What's my next one? I'm going to go with change takes time. Be patient, but consistent. And this was actually advice that I received. The executive chairperson when I started was a gentleman named Dave Hansen, who's still the GM of Epitaph and now is one of the co-partners at Acceleration, both of them Merlin members. And when I showed up, I had a view about, some of the ways that we can modernize how Merlin operates, to take a lot of what I'd learned from working at Meta, make us a more process-oriented company, expand the suite of services, kind of stretch the dough. But that takes time. And I am not a patient person. I have had to teach myself to become patient. Once I see the destination, I'm just like, why are we not there already? And I remember when we were, we have a member facing and an internal CMS to manage all the rights and opt-ins to deals and all the ways that they take advantage of the membership. And we had a system that was sort of kind of starting to nosedive. It was, 10 years in. And we were simultaneously trying to build the new plane. And I would, especially in my first year or two, I get really frustrated. Like, why are we not done yet? Why have they not finished this yet? And I realized, they're basically doing two jobs at the same time. We're trying to maintain this system and still build in new features because we need those because it's going to take a year plus, and then build this new plane. And so a lot of it was just pause, recognize what teams are working through, and be patient, but just stay consistent with the messaging. I mean, that's another Amazon approach. Be very, very consistent with the messaging so people don't lose sight of the priorities.
Yeah. Yeah, we have time for about two more. And I think these last two will be, I know what yours is, but you don't know what mine is. But I think they're going to be something that can loop together a little bit. Mine is, and again, it's another one that's maybe a little counterintuitive to some people, but it really resonated with me. You wrote, when you leave, your true impact is measured by how well things run without you.
Yeah. Yeah. There is a focus that a leader brings to an organization. Right? There are certain things, of course, that someone else is going to have to take over responsibility for, right? Board, managing the board, the board meetings, the things I do at a more senior people at the partnership or their members, of course. So someone does need to step into those roles, and some of that could be the existing senior leadership team. But you want to build an organization that can operate without you. And the reason why is that means that you're doing things the right way. You're pushing down decision-making. You're pushing down authority into different departments and teams. And so I look at it as, I hope and pray that there's a new CEO come January 1st. If there is not, I have full confidence in the team that they can continue to run and operate the company effectively for a significant period of time. And so that's how I know there's success. I know there's success when the new CEO shows up. He says, nothing's broken, and I can take 3 months just to get to know everyone before I decide what, if any, changes I want to start to make or how I want to have my impact. And that will be success for me.
All right. How do you want to end this? What's your last one?
Yeah, I'm going to go a slightly maybe different direction than the one you were expecting.
You're going to call an audible?
I'm calling an audible here. That is true. It's especially for someone who's already explained that they can be verbose, which is if you can't explain it in simple terms, you don't understand it well enough.
Or as we heard a lot working in this business, if you're explaining, you're losing.
Yes. True.
But please explain.
Yes, please explain this one. You were talking earlier about jargon, and I'm a big fan of pulling jargon away, but also just pulling complexity away. Like life, Shakespeare said there's only 7 stories to tell. And so I always like to tell people, okay, pretend I'm your 6-year-old cousin. Now explain it to me. And it's not so much that I need them to explain it to me. I just want them to create clarity of vision, right? How can they just get down to the core point? And I'll share one example. My first boss at Warner Music was a gentleman named Ari Teitz when I was in the Business and Legal Affairs Department of WIA. And I was preparing to have my first sit down with the then CEO, Mike Jabara. And I put together this whole overview, and I had 20 or 30 minutes of information I needed to convey to him for him to make the right or proper decision. And so we're walking up right before Ari knocks on the door. He's like, by the way, you have about 1 minute. And then he knocks on the door. I was like, wait, what? No one told me. Just started freaking out for a sec, or maybe longer than a second, and walked in, and I realized I didn't really have 20 or 30 minutes. It really, there was just the proper amount of information he needed to make the decision around it. And it was really impactful, and it's clearly stuck with me to this day, 15 years later.
Well, Jeremy, this has been great. Congratulations on 2,190 days as CEO of Merlin. And I can't wait to see what the next chapter brings.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it, Jay.
All right. Take care.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.